And we are live. Hello, and welcome to Infocomm Today, live from the Infocomm 14 booth. I'm your host, George Tucker, and today we are going to talk about Apex. Esteemed guests with me here today to talk about this new designation with the Infocomm organization. First to join me here is Betsy Jaffe. She is the Vice President of Communications for Infocomm. Welcome again.
Great to be here. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Also, we have Richard Derbyshire. I said that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Derbyshire. He is from Shen Milson Wilkie. He is part of the Standards Committee as well.
Thanks for being here, George. Yes, I've been participating with Infocomm on standards for now since its inception.
And also, Duffy Wilbert. He is the Senior VP of Member Services. We've spoken in the past. Good to have you on again.
Great to see you, George.
All right. So what we're going to talk about is Apex. It's a new designation by the Infocomm people to help you and your business. But first, let's get a few things straight about it. Duffy, let me talk to you about this. Now, we've had CABSP.
There we go.
That. CABSP. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing it, it's easier to say.
There you go.
Apex. So why the change?
Well, I think after we looked at CABSP, and CABSP has been around for several years, but it was really totally based on education. So it was, I get education, I get my certification, and we built the program totally around that. As we began to look at that and say, okay, what does it really take to be an audiovisual provider of excellence, Apex? As we began to do that, we said, okay, you know what? There's more to it than just the education certification piece. That's critical. That's very important. I need my employees to be educated. I need them to be certified. But what else would make a company be a company of excellence? And we began to look at things like, well, do we use standards when we install products? What do our customers think? Right? I mean, the Apex program, one of the most radical changes, or one of the new things, is the fact that it's not just about the education that you get, the education you do, or even applying the standards, but in the Apex program, we're going to ask your customers what they think of your business and what they think of how you did. And so it's the Apex program is much more fully rounded than the CABSP program is. And then the one other major change we did, CABSP was what I would call a one-size-fits-all. We put the CABSP program out there and said, Mr. Manufacturer, Mr. Integrator, Mr. Rental Staging, and so on and so forth, you can be part of the CABSP program. The Apex program is being built one section at a time. So the first section we're launching is very well targeted at integrators and design consultants. We're going to build a separate program for rental staging. We're going to build a separate program for technology managers. So because each one of those is different, and each one has different requirements.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. The one-size-fits-all. It works only when you retail on the shelf, but here it's good.
Yeah.
Richard, as you said before, you've been involved with the Standards Committee at Infocomm for a good while.
Right.
And you were instrumental in some of the foundations of Apex. Talk to me about what this is built on and why we're doing it.
Okay. Well, Apex uses part of your earning the Apex designation is that you have to demonstrate that you're using the two management standards that Infocomm has developed. One is the 2010 2M, which is a documentation standard. Here are all the types of documents you need to produce in the course of the project so that you can give your client a full picture of what you're going to be delivering. And the second standard is the 2013 10 standard, which is the Systems Performance Verification Standard. In combination, those two standards will allow a vendor to, first of all, understand what they need to document, and then once it is installed and throughout the course of the installation, verify that it's done. If you can document a certain number of instances of using both of these standards in the course of your business, you'll earn the Apex designation. And using the standards constitutes 40% of your grade towards earning the Apex designation. So standards is a very important component of the Apex program.
So take me through part of this process. And by reading some of the documents that Betsy provided me, there's a lot to the process.
Yes, there is.
Of this. So there's some fundamentals that we probably are missing in the industry, or we know we should be doing, that this is part of, no?
Yeah, well, that is correct. And what's interesting in teaching the class over the weekend, primarily to a group of integrators, is that many of the integrators already generate these documents in the course of their business. They just don't see them in the terms of what the verification standards document. So types of things like system descriptions and signal flow diagrams, equipment lists, budgets, how things should function descriptions, so that the client truly understands the full picture of what they're going to be receiving from a client. And that can occur whether it's a design consultant writing what we call a needs analysis or a program report, or a design build integrator providing a system description in the form of, drawings, images, narrative. And then, of course, the full set of documentation for engineering. So all of those pieces are common elements to both of the integration and the consulting process. What we're trying to do in Infocomm is promote that documentation throughout everyone in the industry, because our clients, at the end of the day, need to own proper documentation about what was built. And in the course of evaluating the project as it starts to evolve, is that documentation provides for them the guidelines, the milestones of what the project's going to do. And so we answer through that documentation the basic, what is this AV system going to do? Through the budget, we answer the question, how much does it cost? And then when it's installed, we go through the performance verification does it meet the requirements of performance?
So we're talking about things like that, and also checklists.
Checklists, yes,
Punch
absolutely.
lists.
Checklists, punch lists, verification lists, and these are big lists. The performance verification list is 160 items. Okay, and it's a lot. I mean, and we're trying to find ways to streamline the process and to make it applicable and relevant to all situations, or as much as we can. And those standards are really important elements that Infocomm has been teaching for many, many years. These design standards are now being more apparent or more measurable through the design standard development process, but the real goals of designing systems has been internalized into Infocomm for many, many years, and this is really more of a demonstrable way to say, I designed it correctly, and now I can verify that it has been designed correctly and installed correctly. Our goal, it's a very simple goal, making sure that we can deliver really well-working audiovisual systems to our end clients. So after all, they pay for it, they use it, they own it, and they're the ones who need to benefit from it.
Yeah, and that's one of the arguments you see in the forums about design and function, and some on the other side where they're sort of calling out their cohorts in the industry about not doing something a certain way.
Yeah.
This is a nice way to say you're certified, you know you've learned how to do this.
Right.
And if you didn't know or you just didn't always pay attention to it, now you've got a great way to say I'm certified, I've trained in this.
Yeah,
right.
and one of the things that we need to look at with the Apex program is that, the Infocomm verification formats and the documentation formats, those are the formats and organization of that information that we decided to put together. Many of the other firms have their own methodology. They document the same things, but they just organize their information a little bit differently. So one of the things that we have to work on is how do we allow for the variation between design firm ideas, provided that they provide the same information. Maybe they do it chronologically in a different order, or maybe they call it a different thing, but they still have to provide these core elements because they're common to all of these projects.
Right.
I'm struck by some of it when back in the day, I'm going to call up in an old standard the design dashboard.
Yes.
Which a lot of people loved, some people chafed at, but it was really important because it really did point out you can't just do it the way you want to do it, because there's a process and your user is going to have to figure this thing out. Just because you think it's pretty doesn't mean it works. And this is almost in the same way. Just because you have a folder doesn't mean you've actually documented the way that your user will be or the end client will be happy in the end.
Well, I asked the question of the design class to that very end. I said, is an equipment list with a price on it, is that a program document? Does that describe the system? And the answer to that question is no, it does not, because an equipment list just describes single item entities, What you have to describe is how the system operates fully. So the dashboard, as an example, there are many people who design their own graphical user interfaces. The dashboard tried to provide some guidelines for here are good ways to organize it, and have people taken their own scheme and development from that basis? Absolutely. And they will do so regardless of, there are no GUI police out there telling you how to do your GUI every time.
Well, and to some of the end, that this is not a GUI police or a process police. It's hey, let's do that. It was logical though, because when you're looking at a car dashboard and the right indicator is on it, should be pointing right.
Sure, exactly.
Right. It sounds silly, but a lot of times there was confusion there.
That is correct. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide a common set of information that everybody should be providing in a way that's coherent and simple, but also provides the flexibility for an individual firm to tailor it the way that they feel that they need to do it. Listen, one of the advantages that I've had in my career of being a consultant, I've had the opportunity to do projects all across America, okay? And I can tell you, as many different AV integrators as there are out there, that's how many different ways there are to do things, okay? And some better than others,
Yeah.
some I like more than others, but you know what? Everybody's got their own touch on it, and that's an okay thing.
And it's
Right.
not going to go away.
And
Yeah.
it's not, and we're not going to change that no matter what we do. And I don't think we want to. I think that's one of the great variations of AV is that there are lots of ways to skin the cat, and everybody's got a different idea about it.
And some of them look at that as their value proposition,
It's
right?
exactly
that I do it
correct.
differently as long as I make it follow the standard.
Or as long as I meet the minimum
Right.
goals of
Sure.
acceptance. Right.
Sure, absolutely.
And many of them exceed that. I mean,
Yeah.
quite honestly, some of the documentation we see some vendors is absolutely superlative, truly.
Yeah.
Well, Betsy, Duffy just mentioned that it's a value added for some of these clients, the different way of doing things. That's the same thing with Apex. This is not just a process to get you in line to be standards. There's an advantage, even from Infocomm support, for getting this.
And yes, that's a really big goal of the program. We want consumers to know about the Apex designation and to look for Apex providers first when they're looking for AV integrators or design consultants in the market, because we know that there's that commitment to quality. So often we run into situations where there are issues with the experience in a room, and all of us have had it from time to time when the AV equipment doesn't work quite right, etc. And so by working with an Apex provider, you know you're working with people who are committed to using standards. They're committed to using certified personnel. They're committed to being part of something bigger to help the industry move forward. And really that's what it's all about. So over the next couple of months, we'll be instituting some special programs for Apex companies. Not only can they put decals on their vans, etc., but in addition to that, they'll be able to put it into bid inserts to explain what the program is, but more importantly, just really distinguish themselves in a marketplace that is very complex and difficult to understand sometimes. You know, I think about it these days, everybody's got a website, anybody is a blogger, so everybody's a journalist, and over 80% of people don't believe advertising. So having the Apex designation, I think, can really make a difference in the market.
And how else is Infocomm reaching out to the end clients? I know there's what you've just described, but are there any other outreach programs to identify and make them aware not only of the Apex, but the industry?
Well, I know for this particular program, we're going to be investing in SEO, search engine optimization, so that when people enter into their search engine, AV provider, etc., that information on Apex pops up. We're also going to have a special landing page on the website with a directory of companies. And also when you do a search for an AV provider on the Infocomm site, Apex providers will have a special logo next to their name to make them easy to find.
And I would add to that, I mean, part of this is also grassroots, right? Infocomm has a tremendous membership of technology managers, the people that are at the universities and places that have the equipment. In fact, we just last week, before we came out here, it was a little bit humorous. We got a call from 3 integrators wanting to know how to be in the Apex program because they were bidding on a university, and the university had said we want only Apex authorized dealers to bid.
Wow.
It was a little bit ahead of the curve, but it was very gratifying. So I think even within our own organization and the membership that we have, promoting it to the right people in that, I think we'll see some pickup on it. Very
Absolutely. And one thing that we've definitely seen in the CTS program, that as soon as design consultants started requiring integrators to have those designations, that's when it really picked up. And I even recently heard of a big, giant government project that just came out that said everybody on the project has to have a CTS,
Yep.
and most of the people need to have a CTSD.
Right.
And it's that groundswell, that pull-through that's going to make the really
Sure.
big difference for
Absolutely.
Apex.
And it does show that the bigger end clients, the facilities, the venues, really are recognizing that they want that guarantee, that quality of assurance.
Right.
Now, part of that quality of assurance from the documentation is that there are outreach to customers and customers' reviews.
Yes.
And on the forums that they talk about these things, that is one of the bigger sticking points.
Sure.
They're seeing it basically in the light of Yelp or
Okay.
other forums. And we all know that everyone fears the Twitter trolls, the internet trolls. So take me through the process of why we're doing that and how it guarantees we're not going there and don't need to hire, say, protectmyidentity.com or anything.
No, I mean, I think when we began discussing this program and began discussing it with both users or the ultimate end user, technology manager, and the integrator, one of the things that became very clear is if we create a program that says, Richard, fill out these forms, tell me how great your company is. Well, you know what? Richard's not going to tell me how bad his company is. He's only going to tell me how great his company is.
I know how to fill out that form really well.
Exactly. So I mean, I think so. Where it came from, really.
That's a side business.
There you go. Consulting. So where it really went in the conversation was, well, we really should have a voice of the customer in this process. If Richard goes out and does a job, it'd be really great for the customer. Now, you know what? So what happens is when Richard fills out his, and I'm using him because he happens to be sitting next to me, when he fills out his application, all we're asking him to do is give us names of 3 customers that you've done a job for, and we're going to send them a survey. And frankly, the survey that they get is a very simple 5-question survey, and it asks, much like when you stay at Marriott or a hotel, after you've stayed there, they send you the thing and say, hey, did you enjoy your stay? Were there any issues with your stay? This survey is very similar to that, except it's like, did you see the checklist? Did they provide after the job support? Did they return your calls?
Right.
Those kinds of questions, and that information comes in and then it goes into our file with the application. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, so there's no public component to that.
No, there is no public
I
component
know
at
that's
all.
been discussed online, but there's no truth to that at all. The other thing is there's no penalty for having a bad review because we know some people like to do an anonymous drive-by. It's more that it doesn't count towards Apex, so you're going to have the required number of good reviews.
Right. One of the things we didn't mention earlier when we were talking about the difference between CAVSP and now Apex, Apex is what we call a points program. So when you go up to the website and you look at the documentation, what you're going to see is there are, I think, 7, 8 categories in which you can get points. And it's the total accumulation of all those points that gets you the Apex designation. Some of those categories are required, use of the standards, some of the education pieces, and some are not. So you can kind of mix and match with some of the other things. But certainly the customer survey is a critical piece of it.
And one of the things that we learned during the teaching of the course over the weekend, and again, this is the first time this is being rolled out,
right.
The majority of the integrators who are in the class, they already do their own customer surveys already. I mean, this is already a good business practice. We do it in our firm, and these guys do it in their firm. Now we're just simply having a survey being done by Infocomm, and a smart integrator applying would make sure that they nominate those projects where their clients certainly have a higher quotient of satisfaction than in others.
Well, and that is an important point to remember, is that it stays within the organization.
Yes, absolutely.
This is not even going out to a third-party metricing company or any of that nature.
No.
Your privacy, your data will not be shared, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Right.
Richard, take me through part of the process. Stuff you mentioned, points.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier that it's different for the rental companies as it is for an integrator, for commercial, and there's various little silos here of qualifications.
Well, at this moment in time, the program is designed around design integrator or integrators and design consultants.
Okay.
And that's what this addresses specifically. We spoke about it a little bit during the class, and there will be a different flavor or a different set of metrics for manufacturers, for end users or technology managers, rental staging, and others. One of the discussions, we are hoping to have a debrief when after the show, to talk about what we learned in the class, because we learned a great number of things, some of which give us some different nuances to how Apex needs to be deployed. So the real important thing for an applicant, and we are going to be applying, is to look at what are the documentation pieces we're providing, what are the certifications that my staff has, what are the other manufacturer certifications that we have, what are the other classes and courses that our staff is taking, so we accumulate all those points, and then which projects do we wish to submit upon, and have Infocomm conduct a survey, review all the documentation, et cetera, et cetera. So, as an applicant, you're only at this early stages of the project. We're going to be a large vendor, okay, because of the numbers and size of our company. So we'll have to submit on 6. Okay. Well, my firm starts 300 or 400 projects a year. Okay. So choosing 6 should not be that challenging. I would hope.
But it also is by the size. You said the size of the company.
Yes.
And some other qualifications. And can you take me just a little bit through the basics of the points, just so
okay.
they get a feel?
So, well, there are 100 points. There are 130 available total points,
Okay.
of which you need 100. Okay. Of the 100, 40 are documentation conformance, and I can't remember the exact, but most of their increments of 15 for certifications, for additional product certifications from manufacturers whose programs of certification have been approved by Apex, okay? And many of them are. And in fact, there's already a large number of manufacturer partners who've already signed on for this.
And Richard just touched on something important. You know, I said earlier about what's it take to be a provider of excellence. That was the other piece that we looked at. While we're very proud of Infocomm's education and very proud of our certification, and it's a key component of this program, we also understand that people are going to go out and get Microsoft certifications because they're necessary in this IT space that we work in. There are certifications from various manufacturers that sit around on the show floor that are very critical to the business and getting
Absolutely.
things done. So we give points and credit for those certifications as well that you get there.
Right.
Because it's all, again, as being a full, well-rounded organization when you go out to the customer.
Right. And I think also in addition, you earn points. And remember, this certification you need to renew on an annualized basis.
I was going to ask. Okay.
And that's
Yes.
this is very important so that you need to ingrain into your business practice the use of documentation, maintaining certifications, going out and obtaining additional manufacturer certifications. Remember, new products and new technologies come out in this marketplace continually, and if you sleep, you're not going to keep up with it. You got to keep your ongoing training with these products to know how to deploy them correctly. And then there's also ongoing. There are additional points for classes. So if you take ongoing education, participate in Infocomm roundtables and all sorts of different activities, you are continually to earn, the RU credits, right? But those also contribute to you earning points in the program. So out of that 130, you just need to earn 100, and of which there's some mandatory ones, primarily the documentation and then the customer survey.
Now, Betsy, we said it was annual.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
it one time a year that you sign up, or does it slide? So if I decided now to sign up for it and I get the qualification, this Apex, is that when I redo it again?
When you're ready to sign up, you apply, and then in a year you're up for renewal.
Right,
and
so it's
then
not
you
every
charge your
January.
card.
No, it's a rolling program.
Yeah, so
It's a rolling program.
like the healthcare, I don't have to wait for my
Right.
open
Exactly.
entry
You
season.
don't have to wait for open enrollment.
And really,
Yeah.
the reason for that is we don't want to create any obstacles to companies
Right.
getting involved in Apex. It's not just having them on our list of companies, of course. It's about making those improvements in the industry. We don't want people to delay doing that.
So 30 minutes goes by so fast, right? When
Yes.
we have a show, and we could probably talk for about an hour and a half. How long was the class, Richard?
3 days.
3 days. We're talking 3 full days too. We're not joking.
I was challenged for content sometimes. Yes.
There was no fooling around in that class.
Ooh. Well, Betsy, where can they find more information about Apex?
You can find it at infocom.org/apex.
Okay, and if they have questions pertaining to that, there's a way to do
There's
that
contact information. Aaron Abrams from the Infocom staff is the main contact for that program. There's also a set of FAQs and other information available on the site.
Well, cool. I want to thank my guest again for talking to us about Apex. It is Betsy Jaffe, the Vice President of Communications for Infocom, Richard Derbyshire, he is from Shen Wilson Milky, and part of the Standards Committee, and of course, Duffy Wilbur. Thank you again.
You're welcome, George.
All right.
It's great to be with you.
This has been Infocom Today, live from the Infocom booth at Infocom 14. Stop by, check out the booth, say hello, and get your information. This has been Infocom Today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can edit it out.